Hi, welcome to What Are You Reading podcast with the Public Library of Mount Vernon in Knox County. My name is Christie.
I'm Katie.
And this month's episode, we decided to do a little something different. I chose a nonfiction poetry book. And what did you pick?
I picked, mostly this first book, but I did read the second one. It's a collection of short stories, but translated from Swedish to English.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start with you because, First of all, these covers.
Yeah, how cute are these
so
covers?
Cute.
Yeah, so the first one, they're both short story collections. The first one is An Elderly Lady is Up to No Good.
Ooh.
And then An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed.
Oh my gosh.
So, in the first book, our main character is named Maud. She's 88 years old. Fortunately is able to live in a very nice apartment rent-free. When her parents died, they basically made it so that she and her sister could live there for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
But that's where things start getting complicated.
Oh.
In the first story, there is a famous neighbor that decides that she wants Maud's apartment.
Oh.
And tries to befriend her, and then things go from there.
Oh.
So in the first book, you're mostly in that apartment building in Sweden, and An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed. She's kind of going all over the world because she has been very good with her money and is able to just go on vacation whenever she wants.
Wow. That would be nice.
But yeah, so unfortunately for Maud, people keep winding up dead.
Oh.
So we have to and so they're both mysteries, but they're not your traditional mysteries where you don't know who the killer is. You know who the killer is immediately.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting is the reasons why this person kills the people in the books. That being said, it's not real graphic, so with people that don't like the blood and gore, that's not what this is.
Mm-hmm.
It's very like dark comedy type things.
Okay.
Because we've got a character who is a very unlikely murderer.
Mm-hmm.
And yet is one.
Uh-huh.
And a pretty prolific one at that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we have kind of almost a serial killer type situation?
Yes. It feels very Dexter.
Mm-hmm.
Except the people that get murdered aren't necessarily other serial killers.
Uh-huh.
So it's more so because the character wants something that person is keeping her from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, we one of our favorite shows that we like to talk about in the reference department is Murder, She Wrote. Surprise. And as we've been discussing this over the past month, even though it's a slightly different situation, it's very similar because there's always been that, like subreddit of is Jessica Fletcher the real killer here? Don't let Jessica Fletcher come to town because somebody's gonna die.
Yeah.
So I really like that kind of vibe that it seems like these books have.
And it isn't until almost the end of the first book that the killer may have made a mistake.
Okay.
Someone else. So the second to last story is the only one that is told not from Maud's perspective.
Okay.
So we get that murder, and then the last story is Maud's perspective on that same murder. So there's someone in the building who knows who the murderer is but can't prove it.
Ooh.
So that causes some issues, and it's also because the murderer is not someone you would think of as a murderer. They get away with it really easily because they can turn it on to be like, I can't possibly be a murderer. I would never hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So,
this character is able to get away with quite a lot.
Yes, and we do get, there is a really interesting character arc, not necessarily in An Elderly Lady is Up to No Good, but between that book and An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed, because I think I know Maud by the end of the first book, but by the end of the second book, it's like, what?
Ah, okay.
So, that, I liked that. So I actually like the second book better than the first one, but obviously you have to read the first one to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So, and some of the dead bodies from Maud's past are get mentioned in the first book, but get explained in the second book.
Okay. Yeah, so really, this is a series that actually did progress really well, and you end up liking that second book.
Yeah.
Which is my famous story of, like, Lord of the Rings, because Two Towers is my absolute favorite. So I'm that, like, second book person, too. So
yeah, because there's so much world building, and even though that this is an actual place, there's still, because it's written for people who don't necessarily live in Sweden and know where anything is or how things are.
So you think it was a fairly well done translation?
Yes, I think so. It would have been interesting if I could read Swedish to be able to see what the author was really getting at, but it seems to be translated really well.
Oh, that's awesome. But these caught our eye when they first came into the library. And they were on the new bookshelf. These caught our eye really quickly. Just like we mentioned earlier, those covers are so cute. The book itself, nice and small, so cute.
Yeah, these teeny tiny, it's probably 2 or 3 inches smaller than your, like, standard size book.
It's just, like, begging to be carried in your tote bag or your book bag, to, like, in the doctor's office, like, I'll just read my little murder mystery. Those are really cute.
Yeah.
I definitely want to pick those up and get them on my TBR. The TBR keeps, like, growing.
Oh, absolutely.
So, oh my gosh.
Yeah, even the books that we don't choose for this wind up on my TBR because it's like, well, I want to read it sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. We come across so many things when we're doing research for the podcast that we're just like, that we've got to read this at some point, whether it fits into the schedule or not.
Yeah, so I'm excited to hear about Nocturnal.
Yes.
Because we keep having firsts. So we had our first translation, and now we've got our first book of poetry.
We sure do. And it is, and what got me again, this cover. We're suckers for a really good cover. And this is Nocturnal by Wilder. And it's absolutely stunning. So I saw this come across in the new section, and instantly called to me because we have some just absolutely gorgeous illustrations. I won't give too much away, but we have just this really beautiful, and of course it is inspired by dusk. We have different times of the day, basically. And what really struck me about this was that I was kind of expecting something totally different, because based off of Nocturnal, I was thinking obviously nighttime, perhaps animals, because I'd kind of done a brief look through that we might have some more like nature-inspired poetry, which we do. But this actually caused me to have so many emotions.
Okay.
Was not expecting that. I'm usually a lighter reader. I really enjoy just kind of fun reads. I read lots of like romance, YA, and I love a high fantasy, don't get me wrong, but this was totally out of my comfort zone, totally out of my wheelhouse, and I feel like I'm better because I read it.
Okay.
It definitely made me step back and think about how these poems possibly connected to my life. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of relationships. how you're feeling in different parts of relationships,
Okay.
how we as humans relate to the natural world, and how we can take lessons from the natural world and apply them to things that we might be going through in our life.
Okay.
It's broken down into, let me see here, Dusk is part 1, Northern Lights is part 2, Howl is part 3, and Lucid Dreams is part 4. So we start out with some of the more lighter. We're kind of diving in, right?
Yeah.
So it works you through, and then we're coming back out on the other side of an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, I would imagine with a section called Howl that's not going to be your feel good poetry.
Absolutely not. And there are these moments in here where you're connecting with that animalistic emotional self. Just trying to express yourself and being at your base level of either happiness or sadness, really. And I really did have to sit there. I've actually written down some of these to keep in my journal that I found so inspiring.
Yeah.
It's so inspiring, or things that I wanted to ruminate on more. So I definitely recommend this if you do enjoy poetry. It was fantastic and unlike anything that I had read previously.
So would you say that it's really accessible for like the lay reader that doesn't really read poetry?
Oh yes, absolutely. Like, as somebody that I took poetry in college, but that was a while ago. So I wasn't going into it with like an academic scope or anything like that. And I at first thought, oh, this might be challenging. I might really have to sit with this and break it down. But I felt like after one read and then maybe an out loud read, it would really click with me and seem to be so relatable. So I would say you could pick this up as someone that hasn't been exposed to poetry before and still see the beauty in that.
Okay.
And I would also attribute that to the illustrations.
Yes.
The illustrations definitely set the mood. That grayscale in there, just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, that's what I do read poetry on occasion. And I don't read fairly widely, but I do read some. And what I've experienced recently has been line drawings. And very, very basic, like maybe 1 or 2 lines per poem or, So it's really interesting that this one has more detailed illustrations and talks kind of not goes backward, but uses some, because I do like nature poetry.
Yeah.
And that's not something that we get much right now. Mostly it is about relationships, and mostly where relationships go really bad.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see like how Wilder would compare to like Mary Oliver, who is another sort of modern poet, but talks about nature a lot to see what similarities there might be.
Yeah, I think that you would really enjoy this because it is something that, like I said, very self-reflective. And having the knowledge that you do of current poets, I would be interested to see where this fits in. Because I do think that this has a lane in current poetry, because it's just very, very touching. And I kind of needed to take a minute to like step back and be like, okay, everything's great, you're fine. Like not to scare anyone off, but
this is not real.
Yes, like this is for my entertainment, personal growth. But I'm absolutely inspired by it. I'm really glad that I picked it up. And this was just one of those random things. I'm walking around the library, looking for something for the podcast and thinking like, what have I not done? What would be something that would be good for the podcast? And so glad that I found this.
Great.
And I think, and this is a little sneak peek for you guys, but coming up in April, we're going to be discussing My Wicked, Wicked Ways by Sandra Cisneros as part of the National Endowment for the Arts Big Read. which we're super excited about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad that I dipped my toe into poetry so that I'm ready for my Wicked Ways in April.
Yeah, that'll be exciting.
Yeah, and we're going to do that for the podcast. Another sneak peek next month, we're doing The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, which you've got a collection of short stories.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be reading House on Mango Street next month and talking about it on the podcast. Mm-hmm. We're actually also going to be doing an in-person program. We're going to do a book discussion on The House on Mango Street, March 24th. So be on the lookout for that. Check our Facebook, our Twitter, all that good stuff. We'll do a podcast. We'll do an in-person program. And then the same for My Wicked Ways in April.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's supposed to be some book giveaways as well.
You're right.
There?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. So also March 1st, we're going to start giving away copies of House on Mango Street. And then in April, I believe we'll be giving away copies of My Wicked Ways. So yeah, definitely keep up with us on our website, our Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. We'll have tons of details coming out. It's going to be a really exciting couple months.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's going to be something, too, that we've actually talked about, how exciting it'll be for us, because March and April, Katie and I will both be discussing the same book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much fun, and I'm so glad that we get to share with you guys different books. That way you have kind of something to choose from. But I'm really excited for us to have a discussion on the same text.
Yeah, and since I read House on Mango Street many years ago, it'll be interesting to see what I'll take away with it as an adult. And it'll be really interesting because you haven't read it before.
Yes.
So we'll have a good dynamic for that podcast. So definitely stay tuned.
Yes, absolutely. We're super excited here at the library. So thank you guys so much for joining us, for listening. We appreciate you here. And like, follow, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And we'll see you next month. Bye.
Bye.